to order. So my name is John Mirsky, and I'm participating from Seattle, Washington. And as chair of the Energy Commission, I'm calling this meeting to order. It is May 11th, 2021, and I'd like to welcome everyone to a joint meeting between the Energy Commission and the Planning Commission. This virtual meeting is to affect social distancing and to mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We will conduct this meeting similar to in-person meetings. Commissioners, please remain on camera just as you would be visible during in-person meetings. Also, mute your microphone when not speaking. Public comment will be via telephone only, and I'll give those numbers now, but also repeat it at the appropriate time for the Energy Commission meeting. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities for the Energy Commission, please call one of the following toll-free numbers: 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247, and enter the meeting ID number 913-5783-4502. And these numbers will remain the same for the entire year for the Energy Commission. And also that information, along with 2 local dial-in numbers, is available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city's website, and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, and which is also available online at www.a2gov.org//watchctn. So Missy, would you start us off with the reading of the land acknowledgement?
Absolutely, Chair Mirsky. Right. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from Indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals.
Great, thank you very much. Will we start with a roll call of both commissions, or how do we plan on doing that actually?
Brett, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe as a work session for the Planning Commission, we don't have to do roll call, is that correct?
Yeah, since this is a normal meeting of the Energy Commission, though, I think we will do a roll call just so there's clear attendance on it. Mm-hmm. So I would suggest that the Energy Commission proceeds with their roll call as typical, and then I'll follow with the Planning Commission.
Thanks, Brett. Missy, you want to lead the roll call then?
Absolutely. Commissioner Hookham. I know he's here, but I can't see him. Commissioner McComber. Commissioner Schreiberg.
Here.
Commissioner Clevey.
Here.
Commissioner Levin. Chair Mirsky.
Present, and as I mentioned, dialing in from Seattle, Washington.
Thank you. That was a mistake on my part. I am actually going to read you roll. If you could please say the community, you don't have to say your address, but the community that you're calling in from. So apologies. So I'm just going to go back through that list. Thank you so much. Commissioner Hookham.
Present from Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner McComber. Commissioner Schreiber.
Also present in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Clevey.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Levin. Chair Mirsky, we've got co-chair Colvin Garcia.
Present and participating from Ann Arbor tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Briggs.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Radina.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Zucker.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hatcher. Commissioner McCoy.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner George told us he wouldn't be able to attend. Commissioner Singleton. Commissioner Kerber.
Here in Ann Arbor.
All right, you have a quorum.
On behalf of the Planning Commission, Commissioner Mills,
Present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Milstein,
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Gibb Randall,
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Abrams,
Here from New York.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Dish,
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lee,
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Clark,
Here in Ann Arbor.
full commission.
So was that, are you finished then with the roll call, Brett? Okay, very good, thank you. So Missy, I think we agreed that we're gonna do the energy reports and reports from commissioners after the special joint session.
That's right. We were just going to do the approval of agenda and minutes and then go to public.
Okay, right.
then
Yep.
presentation.
So, okay. So would I be able to get a move, I should say, to approve today's agenda?
And then that.
A
Support.
second. Very good. All in favor of the current agenda or any proposed changes or additions? All in-
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, good. And anyone opposed? So the agenda is approved. And then in terms of approval of the minutes, can we get someone to approve the minutes of our last meeting for the Energy Commission?
I move to approve the minutes of our last Energy Commission meeting.
Any second, please?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Or not aye, but all.
Aye.
Okay, say yes. Okay, and all opposed? Anyone opposed? Very good. They pass as well. Thank you. So Missy, I'm going to turn things over to you for an introduction of our joint presentation and the presenter. And if you could take it from here, that would be great.
Sure. I do believe, Chair Morski, that we had decided to do public comment before. I don't see anyone in the queue, but
Okay.
we could open that up and then we'll do it again at the end if you.
Okay, I'll do that then. So this is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. If you are watching on CTN, please call 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter the meeting ID 913-5783-4502. Again, this information is also displayed on the media agenda and on the video feed. Staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please speak to a quiet area or move to a quiet area and mute any television or background noise so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Do we have anyone?
So far, we do not.
Okay, we'll wait 30 seconds or so. But we will have, again, a second opportunity towards the end of the meeting or at the end of the meeting. Any indication? Okay, very good. So let's close that and then move on to our special presentations. And we have 2 of them, and I think only one is are we going to do both with the Planning Commission? Is that the intent?
Yep, we're going to keep the bodies together. So welcome, Planning Commission members.
Yes, indeed.
All right, so first and foremost, it is my really great pleasure to share with you some of our colleagues and their expertise from the Rocky Mountain Institute, well, formerly Rocky Mountain Institute, now just RMI, apologies. For those joining us today for the session, the Energy Commission is, of course, thinking about how to holistically move forward the 820 initiative, including really sticky work around electrification. And so we know the Planning Commission is also struggling with this, thinking about this, navigating this landscape, all of the above. We reached out to RMI, to our two guests today, to give us kind of an overview of what's happening in the electrification landscape, to understand the resources that are available to us as we navigate this together. So with that, it's my great pleasure to turn it over to Anna Sophia. And Anna Sophia has actually been helping the city on numerous initiatives. If you join us tomorrow night, she'll be speaking at a heat pump workshop that we're hosting as well. She is the Senior Associate on their carbon-free buildings work at RMI. She is exceptionally knowledgeable on this topic and someone that has been nothing short of a pleasure to work with. So thank you so much for joining us. And we also have Brett Bridgeland with us, who's a manager in the buildings practice at RMI and also an expert in electrification and all things carbonization within the building stock. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I think Anna, some slides.
Yeah, I'll share them. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Super. And then are you looking at my slide now? Okay, great. Well, thank you all for having us. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today. I'll kick us off, get started in a moment. And Missy, could you remind me on the timing here? I think we're going to get through this presentation and have some time after for Q&A. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, super. So my colleague Brett and I here are here to talk about carbon-free buildings. And as you all know, this is a key body of work that the city has undertaken. And so there are a couple things we'll share today, trying to get everyone have the same vocabulary, but really we're hoping to have a rich discussion and answer your questions after the presentation. But to start, I'll talk a little bit about why are we even talking about electrification? What is this whole electrification thing and why is it important? Then Brett's going to talk to us a little bit about what electrification really looks like. And then we're going to offer some advice, given our experience about where Ann Arbor should go in order to tackle this really complicated space. So with that, I'll kick us off and start by talking about electrification. And I won't spend too much time here because we all know that you are all very motivated to decarbonize buildings, but I do want to spend a little bit of time to make sure we're all on the same page on why we might want to tackle this big issue. And for me, there are three key issues. The first is climate, the second is health, and the last is consumer protection. And I'll talk a little bit about each of these. So to start, I'll say this is tackling the buildings issue is critical if Ann Arbor is going to meet its carbon goals. So, you know, if you look at all of the emissions from buildings, both indirect through electricity consumption and direct emissions, the fossil fuels that we combust in our buildings, that alone makes up 77% of Ann Arbor's greenhouse gas emissions. And Ann Arbor already has some really robust goals in order to try to reduce these emissions, which are outlined in the approved carbon emissions plan. But to put this into further context, you know, this is not just an issue of Ann Arbor. This is a state, a federal, and an international issue as well. You know, Governor Whitmer announced the plans for carbon neutrality by 2050. And today in Michigan, about 20% of all emissions come from the fossil fuels that we combust in our buildings. So we literally, or Michigan can literally not meet its climate goals unless it tackles this really complicated element of the building decarbonization puzzle. And from the federal perspective, we also have seen a lot of leadership from the Biden administration in an attempt to reduce emissions. And this is especially relevant to Michigan because Michigan is among the top 5 states with the highest emissions from building sectors. So all this to say, we cannot meet our climate goals without also tackling building decarbonization, and building electrification is a key component to that. So I'm sure you all are very familiar with that narrative, but the thing that has been shocking to me as I have worked more and more in the building space is how often we ignore the health impacts of fossil fuel combustion in our building. And this has really serious implications for our communities because even before the pandemic, we spent about 90% of our times indoors. That means that our indoor air quality is the most important air quality that we are exposed to. And unfortunately, today, the EPA does not regulate indoor air quality. And what this means is that because there is a lack of regulation of indoor air quality, often our indoors are 2 to 5 times and sometimes even 100 times more polluted than what would be legal outside. So that means that if we had levels of pollutants that we are exposed to 90% of the time indoors, that would be illegal outside our homes. So this has really serious health implications. One of the biggest sources of emissions inside our homes are fossil fuel stoves. When we talk about stoves, usually the pollutant that we're concerned about is NO2. And NO2 is especially troubling for children. They have many serious health side effects. Children are especially susceptible to this pollutant for a couple reasons. First, they have higher breathing rates and are more physically active. So they're breathing more pollutants. They have a higher lung surface to body ratio and have smaller bodies, which means that they're proportionately absorbing a lot more pollutants. And also they have immature lungs and an immature immune system. So these pollutants that are unregulated and we're exposed to for long periods of time are affecting our children and other susceptible people with respiratory illness. Fortunately, there are a lot of technology innovations that help us counter and reduce this sort of pollution. Electric stoves, which usually have a bad rep for being slow or antiquated, are a really effective way to eliminate the source of combustion in our homes. And fortunately, we don't have to depend on the technology that our grandparents used. Today, many chefs and many homeowners are choosing to switch to induction cooking, which is a form of electric cooking that is healthier because we're not combusting anything. It's faster and it's safer. So unlike a traditional electric stove that heats up a surface in order to cook, it uses induction. So only the pan is getting hot. So as you see in this picture, someone could put their hand on the stove while you're cooking and not get burnt. So this has many benefits. And as you'll see throughout our presentation, technology has improved so much over time that there are readily available technology that we can use to replace these sources of emissions. So indoor air quality is really bad, but this also has but combusting fossil fuels in our buildings also has really serious outdoor air quality implications. A recent study from Harvard has estimated that pollution from gas, biomass, and wood in buildings is now responsible for 4,000 early deaths in the United States. In Michigan, that means approximately 841 early deaths. This is about a $9 billion economic impact in Michigan. And this is definitely an underestimate of the cost of combustion in our buildings. So essentially what this means is that if we only looked at the cost of premature deaths that result from outdoor air pollution, from combusting things in buildings, that is $9 billion. And that's not even accounting for hospital visits or indoor air quality impacts. So this is a very serious economic impact for our communities. And also is affecting our ability to meet federal regulations. So Michigan, as many of you know, has some ozone non-attainment areas, including the orange areas highlighted in the Michigan map here. And what we see is that NOx, which we see as a pollutant from burning gas in our buildings, is a precursor to ozone. So it directly contributes to Michigan's non-attainment of ozone levels. So this is very surprising for people because a lot of people think that combustion of gas for electricity or coal are some of the biggest uses or sources of ozone and NOx. But for the same amount of gas burned in a fossil fuel electricity plant and compare that to our home, a furnace releases 2 to 5 times as much nitrogen dioxide as a power plant. So even if we're burning fewer or a less amount of gas in our homes, it's a lot dirtier and it's not quite as regulated. So it has really serious implications for our ability to maintain a healthy outdoor environment. And then lastly, this is a really important area to consider in terms of consumer protection. Every time that we make investments in fossil fuel infrastructure or a fossil fuel appliance, we are making an investment that represents a financial risk for the community. So today, fossil fuel infrastructure, so for example, the pipelines that are laid in the community are depreciated at a rate of 50 years. But if we are serious about our climate commitments, we don't have 50 years to retire these assets. You know, and Ann Arbor has a carbon neutrality goal by 2030. This means that these assets are going to have to be depreciated in a much shorter amount of time, leading to a lot of unnecessary economic impacts for customers. And then on the appliance side, every fossil fuel appliance you have in your home lasts anywhere from 12 to 15 years. That means that before 2050, when scientists have said we have to get to zero across our economy, we only have 1 or 2 opportunities to replace a furnace. So with an all-electric option. So if we don't replace it with the right technology today, we might be leading to unnecessary burden by consumers that will have to prematurely replace these appliances. So because of climate, because health, and because of the economic burden, it's really important for us to start tackling building electrification today. And Brett will tell you a little bit about what building electrification actually looks like.
Thanks, Anna Sophia. So Anna Sophia set us up with kind of the why behind electrification. I'm going to dig in here for a few minutes on what we're actually talking about as far as the technology. You can go to the next slide. This will be a primer. We could spend a few hours probably talking about this. It seems like every time I talk to a builder or an installer of heat pumps, I learn new things, but this can give an overview of what the technology is and how it works. So building electrification, that term, when we use that term, what we're referring to is the replacement of fossil fuels that are combusted in the home by efficient electric equipment. And the idea here is that, of course, that equipment has to draw its electricity from somewhere, and electricity is generated by a source. And increasingly, that electricity source is going to become clean, if it's not already somewhat clean already. We also, in this topic of building electrification, we also do talk about the conversion of inefficient electric heating technologies to higher efficiency equipment. So next slide. So when we talk about beneficial electrification, we're not talking about electric resistance baseboard heaters. That's literally the same technology that's in your toaster. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about heat pumps. Heat pumps use the refrigeration cycle. It's the same cycle that's in your refrigerator in your kitchen. Essentially the same as the air conditioner that you have right now, but run in reverse. And so it's electric powered, and it uses the refrigeration cycle to move heat energy from, in the wintertime, from the cold outside air into your home. So even though it's wintertime, there's heat energy out there, and the refrigeration cycle can grab that and move it into your house and turn it into usable warm air. So that process uses significantly less electricity than electric resistance. And when we look at the source energy, so tracing that electricity all the way back to the power plants, we see that it's generally going to be more efficient than burning gas in your home. Next slide. So the term heat pumps, that term can be used for a few different things. What I was just describing is air source heat pumps. And so that's kind of what's starting to see the most uptake in a lot of applications, even in the upper Midwest here. And that pulls heat energy out literally out from the outside air and moves it into your home. There are also ground source heat pumps, which have been around for some time, which do the same thing with the loop in the ground. They pull heat out of the ground in the wintertime. Water source heat pumps, it's another variation. If you have some body of water, some source that is nearby, you can pull heat out of that. You do also, that term water source heat pump can also be used in multifamily buildings as a solution for delivering heat to each of the individual units. But in that case, there's a water loop that has to be fed by some kind of central plant or central boiler for the building. And then lastly, heat pump water heaters, which is a solution to domestic hot water that's about 3 times more efficient than an electric resistance water heater. Next slide. A few pictures of what this looks like. So on the top, this would be the space heating and cooling. And I should note that these units all do heating and cooling. They serve both functions. All the way on the top left there, that would be the outdoor unit for sort of a residential type mini split system. And the one next to it is, that looks familiar. That looks like your air conditioner probably, that can be run in reverse and do heating in the wintertime too, if it's designed to. For larger buildings, you can assemble a number of these outdoor units in a plant format, either individually zoned or tied together to deliver the capacity that's needed. And then there are also variations that go through the wall, like a package terminal heat pump, as is shown in there. So these products all exist on the market today. They're increasingly becoming commoditized. I'll talk a little bit here about how they've improved in performance for cold climates. heat pump water heaters on the bottom there. The bottom left is probably the most common that is seen right now. That's a unit that would sit inside your home, inside of the conditioned space, and it pulls heat out of the air in your home. So in a mechanical room or in your basement, pulls it out of the air in the room and puts it into the water. So that's called a unitary system. There are also split systems, as is shown on the right there, where you've got an outdoor unit and an indoor storage tank. And so there are a couple of options there. Next slide. So like I said, one of the reasons that the conversation for electrification has been heating up recently, excuse the pun, is that the technology has increased, has improved significantly for cold climates recently. And so, ground source heat pumps have been around for quite some time. That's probably the first time you heard the term heat pumps. But now the air source systems can function and maintain the needed capacity down to -15 or even down to -30 Fahrenheit. There are still in installations here, I have seen often electric resistance that's installed as a backup, or if there's existing fossil fuel that can be left as a backup source. It's in most cases, it's not necessary. The anecdotes I heard when the polar vortex went through recently is that, because this was the cold climate heat pumps had sort of just come on, and this was the first big test. And some people did run out and buy space heaters as a backup, but then in most cases they didn't need them because the heat pumps kept up as well as anybody else's furnace did. Cold climate heat pumps, it is a special thing. Not all heat pumps are created equal. There's a great database from an organization, NEEP, who runs programs in the Northeast, and they've started assembling a list of what products work really well in cold climates and classifying them accordingly. So it's important to select a cold climate heat pump specifically. Next. Keep going. Next slide. So putting this together, I know Sophia talked about the why, to get high-level introduction to what the technology is. So from the city's perspective, how do we think about starting to engage the community? And first and foremost, I think it's important to emphasize the equity considerations associated with beneficial electrifications. And there's a couple ways that can and should come into play. For one thing, looking at the building stock that serves low and moderate income customers, and especially affordable housing, there are often opportunities there to significantly improve quality of life, comfort, reduce energy bills. Affordable housing can tend to have more electric resistance, which is kind of a no-brainer in terms of cost effectiveness, replacing with heat pumps today. So looking at that building stock and finding solutions for that immediately is a big opportunity. The second is thinking about the jobs associated. So there's a clean energy transition that's going to happen here, and it's got this aspect of work that needs to be done in the homes and buildings in our community, and engaging the communities, the Black and brown communities that haven't traditionally been part of energy efficiency, is another great opportunity to level the playing field. So I've had conversations with EJ focused organizations who say, get in at the ground level. Let's be part of the solution. Have our communities delivering the solutions to our own communities, and have that be part of the wealth and job creation in this next energy sort of transition for the country. So engaging those communities early on as part and contributors of this, not something to be done to them after the fact, but have them be a driver. Next slide. And then there is a question here on prioritization. And so, like I've said, heat pumps can work really well. They're, obviously we've got a whole wealth of infrastructure that's already out there, and the vast majority of homes do have gas. So we can look at the building stock and sort of prioritize where it makes the most sense, and think about where we can get some early wins that demonstrate that the technology works, and start to build that capacity in the marketplace with contractors and awareness with customers. So new construction is great application because it's always easier to make these decisions up front. You get the benefit of not having to install gas infrastructure to a home, and you can design the home easily to minimize system sizes and things like that. So new construction is a great application. Replacement of electric resistance, again, this is another potential quick win. Electric resistance compared to air source heat pumps, you're going to cut electric use by approximately 2/3, and you're going to have the panel capacity required to electrify. You've already got plenty of electric capacity to the home. Replacing delivered fuels, more of a rural solution, I think, but again, it's very cost effective. And also looking at the gas infrastructure for whether it's new neighborhoods or replacement of infrastructure within the community. I live in Chicago. I love Chicago. We're in the process of replacing every gas line in the entire city because it's aging out. And at the same time that we're also are talking about decarbonizing across the country. So thinking about the gas infrastructure question is also important. And then last but not least, thinking about the health and emissions impacts that Anna Sophia mentioned earlier, trying to put a value to that. So RMI did analysis for new construction, comparing the economics of a mixed fuel gas heated home versus an all electric home in a number of locations across the US. And we found that in every location, it is cost effective on a net present value today to go with the all electric home. And that includes Columbus, Ohio, same climate zone as where you are, and all the way up to Minneapolis, which is obviously much colder. And so, we've got a link to this study and that we can provide. But the outlook is good as far as the economics of new construction.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to think about new construction as a high leverage opportunity because retrofits are really hard. Any of you that have done anything to your house know that it is challenging to do anything. And we see that in the electrification space too. This graph is just one example of many studies that try to quantify the cost of transitioning a mixed fuel building to an all-electric building. This happens to be a set of different commercial buildings. And what you see here is that if you look at the simple payback of some of these retrofits to electrification, in some buildings, you do not get a payback for transitioning to building electrification today. So this means it is super important that any new building that we are installing now is built to the quality that we want for a future. That said, I do want to emphasize that we expect that these costs will continue to come down over time. Brett has talked about some of the big technology improvements we've seen over time. But one of the biggest sources of costs that we see across the US are actually from soft costs. So these are installation costs. So cities have a big role to play in helping drive down these costs, making sure that installers have the right information, the right training, so that they are not pricing in a big risk premium into their retrofit installations. Like Brett mentioned, there are a lot of really wonderful resources out there for cities that are looking to encourage building electrification in their cities. I'll point this one out because it just came out maybe 2 weeks ago, and it's a really wonderful resource. And they flagged 4 key considerations for city staff that are looking to encourage retrofits. The first is to really think about engaging with building owners before equipment fails. You know, once a building owner or house owner's furnace breaks, that's the wrong time to be talking about building electrification, because at that point it becomes a heating emergency, especially if this is happening in the winter, and there's no time for upgrades to the infrastructure. And so early engagement is really critical. The second is demonstrating to the supply chain that your city is an appealing place to invest, either via policy or market sizing opportunity information that you can offer manufacturers. The third is supporting whole building electrical service upgrade. This will be especially important if you're not only thinking about building electrification, but you're also thinking about electric vehicles and solar. You need to think about how all of these components are affecting the building in a whole system. And then the last, and really touches on the point that Brett mentioned about an equitable transition, you have to think about how you're providing safeguards to prevent displacement if you're making investments in the buildings. So with that, you know, here's how we see it. If we were in your shoes, this is kind of how we would be thinking about where we would focus first. We would start with new construction. I know that Ann Arbor doesn't have the luxury of setting its own building codes today, but there are ways to incentivize new construction to be built right from the start. The second opportunity, which Brett really emphasized, was on electric resistance. This is a cost-saving opportunity today for residents. And actually, Ann Arbor has quite a few residents. About 22% of Ann Arbor's housing units currently run on electric resistance. So this is a great place to start building that supply chain and getting contractors comfortable with this technology. Next, city buildings, affordable multifamily housing, introducing this technology when people are replacing their air conditioning. As Brett mentioned, this technology provides both cooling and heating. And then probably the toughest nut to crack will be the gas retrofits. And we can talk about those in the questions. So with that, I'm offering here some next steps as you're thinking about where to go from here. Assessing and growing government capacity will be really critical. If you are engaging with building owners early and often, what does that mean for how much staff and what background they need in order to support that? You need a productive relationship with the utility, especially as you're thinking about electricity service upgrades to specific neighborhoods that are going primarily electric. Demonstrating city leadership is also a good way to build that supply chain. If you start with city buildings, that can be a good opportunity to help bring down that risk premium that we talked about earlier. Green zoning opportunities are a good way to get around this building code preemption that you have in the city of Ann Arbor. And then I know Missy is a big advocate across many forums, but continuing to advocate for regulatory and policy interventions. And then lastly, making sure the people that are making these decisions have the right resources. And I'm sure this all feels very overwhelming. This is not easy to completely transform the way that our buildings run. But fortunately, it's not the first time in the United States that we've made a big transition. In the 1940s, most of our homes ran on coal. It's hard to believe that today. And in just 40 years, coal has basically disappeared as a heating source. And electricity has been on the rise ever since. So we can do it. And I hope that you all consider RMI as a partner in thinking through this complicated but really critical transition. We've laid out here some of the best resources we've used. I think a lot of them will be useful to thinking about how to move forward. I think Missy can provide these. But with that, eager to hear your questions. I know we've gone a little bit over, Missy, but feel free to tell us how much time we have for questions.
This is John Mursky. As far as I'm concerned, this is really important, so I don't know that we want to limit the questions. I have a little bit of glare. If people can use their reactions and put your hand up. I see that Commissioner Clevey has a question. Mark, you want to start us off with the Q&A?
Yes, sir. I'm one of those who think of Rocky Mountain Institute myself. I can't quite get it to RMI these days. It's great to see you guys are still in business, and please give our best to your founders. My question, it really has to do with staging. Do you have resources or papers or some writings or something you could point me to that addresses the pacing of electrification and the priority of electrification? It seems crazy to put an air-to-air heat exchanger on my house and then run it with electricity that's generated with coal or frack gas. So at some point, I have to have access to renewable energy either through a utility that we have a really good relationship with, good luck, or some other way. So I guess the question is, as part of your formula or recommendation on next steps, how does access to renewable energy to power the electrification factor in? That's my question.
I can give that a shot if you want, Anna Sophia. Yeah, that is a key question because you do have to think about where your electricity is coming from. I guess the two things that I'd say to that point. I mean, for one thing, immediately you have one thing in your control, which is you can put solar on your house and feel pretty good about it. Of course, you're still connected to the grid, so there's that aspect of it. But the other part of it is looking at the lifetime of this equipment, and so in the time that you have this heat pump installed or the alternative, the furnace, how many years is it going to be in there? 15, 20, 25? How long do people leave equipment in their houses? It's important to look at the cumulative emissions across that and what the grid's going to do across that trajectory. And I don't have in my back pocket, I don't have exactly what the summation of that looks like for Ann Arbor specifically, but I don't know. We could follow up offline with that and see if anybody's done thinking on that specific to your,
Yeah, I'll add, Brett. I think that the key thing to emphasize here is you're right. Building electrification on its own is not the solution. We're thinking about decarbonizing the whole economy. And the overall strategy that we talk about is efficiency. Of course, we need to use less energy overall, renewables, and then electrify everything to run on those renewables. And so because we are on this journey to decarbonize our electricity system, we did an analysis of every state in the US, and we found that for 99% of US residents, if you install a heat pump today, if you look at the emissions over the lifetime, it will save emissions compared to a highly efficient gas furnace. And in places like Ann Arbor, where you're talking about much faster pace than what we're seeing nationally, those emission reductions would happen much quickly over the lifetime of the technology. But the quickest way to do it, as Brett mentioned, is to put solar on your roof.
Thank you. Commissioner Schreiberg.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation. Just wanted to see if you could expand on the bullet point where you said the need for partnership with utilities, because I'm trying to think through the incentive structure for utilities and what sorts of partnerships are needed to help accelerate this.
Yeah, I think there's two flavors of that. One would be incentives for installation, and Michigan, like many states, is per energy efficiency regulations. It's tied to energy efficiency as opposed to beneficial electrification, and so there are incentives out there. Check them out; they're good. They'll take a bite out of take a bite out of the price of a heat pump. But it varies, and it's not going to buy the whole heat pump, for instance. It's probably not going to come close right now. The other part so that's part of it, link up with the energy efficiency programs. The other part of it is thinking about electric capacity, because especially in a retrofit application, you may be in a condition where you need to add capacity to the home, or at least run 240-volt service to where you need it in the home to these things. And so connecting with the utility to streamline service improvements like that where they're needed is something that could go a long ways towards easing a glide path to electrification.
That's right. And I'll just point out that the second resource on that resource list is a deck all about utility and city engagement on electrification that you can look at in more detail.
Commissioner Calvin Garcia. You are muted.
Thanks. Thank you so much for being here. I've been really looking forward to this presentation. My question is with regards to key city staff next steps, your first item about growing government capacity. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
You want to take that,
Yeah.
Sophia?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, I think the key thing here is to understand what role you're expecting the city to play in this transition, and then to make sure that your staff is has the right skill set or is properly resourced to do that. So, one example would be if the city is supporting building owners prior to their equipment failing, which is ideally the way you would do it. You would engage with building owners way before they have a problem. Then you would need staff that could support that level of engagement, kind of spoke the language that building owners speak in order to talk through these problems with them. So I think similarly in the planning process, if you're providing zoning incentives for building electrification or all electric buildings, you'll need city planners that are knowledgeable about the technology and what building owners or building developers should really be providing. So those are the types of things I'm thinking about when I say evaluate and consider improving or upping the capacity of government.
The other thing that I've heard from other city officials that are trying to deal with this is that often the questions end up, the buck stops with the city. They have to answer the questions, and even down to the level of the technology and sort of convincing certain parties that it works and the solutions are out there. And so to the extent that those resources can be developed and on hand for sort of an easy response. We provided in the resources, we did provide links to some resources that have been used in that capacity, specifically in other locations. And I've heard rumor that there's a Michigan specific version of kind of a guidebook for electrification that should be coming out, and certainly from another organization. And I think that could be extremely useful for city officials.
But that's good to know. If you get word of that, if you can let Missy know, that would be appreciated.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. I have a comment, a brief comment, and a question that I hope will spur some thinking and questions potentially from Planning Commission members. Just a brief comment, and that is that it was not mentioned that there are also heat pump dryers. In the big scheme of things, that's not a significant contributor. Obviously, they're not running typically as much as a stove, a gas cooktop, or oven for that matter, as well as a furnace. But I own one. They came on the market about 5 years ago in the US. I think they've been on the market in Europe for about 10 years. So people, we want to encourage people to consider that. The question that I had is, you talked about starting out with focusing on new construction. And you mentioned that there's savings to be had by only installing electrical infrastructure in a new building. I'm wondering if it's also possible, and maybe someone from Planning Commission can speak to this, whether it's possible that the city does something to maybe change fee structures or something like that for tap-ins on either the gas side, which makes it more expensive, or on the electric side, would potentially makes it less expensive if a gas connection is foregone or not used. I'm wondering if there's anything that you've heard, anybody on the call or from RMI or from planning, whether that's something that potentially could be leveraged. Sarah, did you have a comment on that, or did you have a different question?
Totally different question.
Totally different. Okay, we'll take yours after any comments about mine. Or
yeah.
On the gas service question, I have heard that might be a question about rate basing with the gas utility. So it may be something that rises to the policy level. So that's where it might go. And don't forget, there's also piping in the home too. So it's not just getting the gas to the home, but also the copper inside.
Sure.
So
yeah, I can see where much of this would be controlled by the utility. I'm just wondering if the city can do anything to offer carrots or sticks so that we basically, with new construction, eliminate as much new construction with the double infrastructure of gas and electricity, and just move to strictly electrical infrastructure with new buildings. Does anybody know whether that's possible, that the city can influence that? Brett, did you want to speak?
No, but I'm curious to hear if people have thoughts on this.
And I was thinking Brett Leonard, maybe.
Two Bretts, other Brett.
Yes.
Sure. Great name,
Go ahead,
Brett.
Brett.
For those that don't know me, I'm Brett Leonard. I'm the planning manager. So I think it's an interesting question. I will say that I've had more involvement in exploring those related issues, frankly, as it relates to water and sewer fees at the city. Those can be, I'm speculating here, but I think that they can be much more adverse to a project than the utility tap fees, which are sort of, while there are some incremental aspects of those that are city related, street cuts, the like, I think a lot of those are established by the utility companies themselves. So my initial thought is that it might be possible, but I think that because those particular aspects of the development, the city has a relatively minor role in those, I don't know how beneficial we might be able to incentivize that, but every bit helps. The short answer is I think it's probably worth exploring. I don't know how much of a large benefit I see there.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'll just note.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'll just note that something that I've heard some cities do, I think this was started in the city of Seattle, that also was not able to require all electric buildings initially, although they recently have, was that they first required all building developers to consider the cost and show the proposal of what an all-electric version of the building looked like. And so often builders would come with both proposals, and what they would find out, kind of being forced to do this exercise, is that actually the all-electric version is cheaper. And they're like, oh, well, looks like I'm going all-electric. This is not something I considered before. And so, perhaps that is an approach that is just elevating the cost savings, because I think a lot of developers have not considered or do not consider what an all-electric version would look like.
I think the Planning Commission has been doing that in recent instances, at least requesting it, but potentially a policy change to require it is something we can think about. We'll capture this in the minutes and do a little bit more digging after the meeting. So thanks for that exchange. Commissioner Mills, take it away.
As Anna Sophia knows, I've got a lot of questions for her. But also for the Energy Commission too, just so to kind of background, like as Planning Commission, we have been asking, inquiring, encouraging, because that's within our current confines. And we do have some policies that do encourage or incentivize, but we haven't had very many takers. And so that's one of the things, like realigning those policies. We do have like green bonuses. It's also tied to affordability though. And so this is, because these things often come up in the same breath, and these are dual goals in our city of sustainability and affordability. We hear some different things when we've asked developers about this. There's different kinds of housing stock, new buildings that are being built in the city, single family homes, multifamily, like low rise, and then multifamily high rise. The upfront cost analysis, do you know if it's consistently cheaper across all of those building types, electrification?
No, I don't think it's possible to make a blanket case like that. And it probably, like, there's so much nuance to cost estimates, and I came from the design world and an architect, and it's just, what does the supplier have on hand, and what's the familiarity, or are they intentionally bidding themselves out of something that they don't want to do, and then also how much presence is there from the manufacturers? Are they there as a resource to help these people figure it out so they don't have to put a big risk premium on top of this stuff? So I don't think it's possible to make a blanket statement like that. And it also, to recognize the cost savings, it really needs to be done done correct and sort of integratively, and look at all the elements in the big picture. But I certainly I've heard enough anecdotes out there from, like in the mid-rise, or I should say low to mid-rise multifamily sector, at least around here, it's kind of the Wild West of system types right now, because they're all pretty darn close. And so that's one where it seems like multifamily is ripe for a pretty rapid transition. And then home building is a different beast because it's so commoditized and streamlined. It's a matter of how fast we can sort of transition that market. That's not a very good answer, and it doesn't explicitly give an answer to the question, but that's what I know.
But I think it's important to elevate where these cost savings are coming from. And I think there are a couple drivers. The first is the lack of gas infrastructure. So, it does depend on the, what the utility is going to offer the developer, and how much they have to pay to extend the gas lines to the buildings, and to develop the gas infrastructure within the building. But the other big driver is only having one piece of equipment for both heating and cooling. And of course, that would be different if the building is not providing cooling, or had not intended to provide cooling, and so when I've seen several different analysis, those are some of the biggest drivers to the lower upfront costs of all electric as opposed to mixed fuel buildings. So hopefully go ahead.
The idea that we're getting mixed things could be legit. It's not that they just don't know, that they may come back saying, we ran the numbers and it's more expensive. I mean, what we heard recently, honestly, on a project is we can't do it on the end units. We can do it on the middle units of a condo building. And so that's not crazy. It's not just the lack of education. It could be that, like, based on, different building types, it may be different.
Right, and especially in a nascent market, and in today's construction market where there's a shortage of everything, I'm not surprised to see fluctuations in prices like that. I would just say keep pushing on the savers that Anna Sophia mentioned, and hopefully we get more of the success stories and build a market, and then it snowballs and it commoditizes and costs come down.
Okay.
Commissioner Hookham, did you want to comment on this before Sarah goes to her remaining questions?
Oh, I've got 100 questions myself. I'm a building engineer, so this kind of fits in my hobby, right? The one answer to that question I think you really need to look at is life cycle cost. If you just look at it from a first cost, which unfortunately a lot of the regulators have to do, it doesn't hunt at residential scale right now. But I think if you look at life cycle cost and you throw in a carbon piece, whether it's a tax or a fee or however you want to structure it, I think any of these infrastructure types will hunt with electrification right out of the box. The challenge is getting regulators to think life cycle and to actually put that in rules and adopt some energy codes that really focus on that. I think we'll see some big changes then. But right now, you mentioned that Michigan's kind of a tough spot because our codes and standards are lagging. We're not allowed as a city to do anything differently. So we'll have to continue to fight the fight and see what we can do. I think one piece that RMI, thank you for presenting tonight. The one thing you might want to mention too is with the pandemic, the number of commercial buildings out there is kind of bloated. And I think going forward, we're going to see less demand for commercial size buildings. What I think we should be looking at is kind of like megawatts. Why do we need all this? Why do we need all these new buildings? Let's retrofit and use buildings that have the capability to perform well as an electrified building and eliminate the buildings that are antiquated and cannot be energy efficient. If we start thinking about that mindset, I think we'll see a reduction in stock that's related to the size of the city. We won't be building as many buildings. We won't need as many energy systems to support them. And I think we'll really make a difference from a carbon point of view. So just a point of view of a life cycle kind of mindset. Thanks.
Thanks. Great point.
I just have a quick comment too.
Go ahead, Mark, and then we'll get back to Sarah.
I think, Sarah, on the question that you're asking here, perhaps part of the answer is, sort of a do no harm to future electrification, because we know that, during the next 20 years or so, the life cycle of these buildings, the economics are going to change over time. So the one thing I think that we can do, and you heard it from the first question I have asked, is we need to get as much solar up as possible. And so on these new buildings, to me, the number one question that seems to be relevant is the building, does it face south, or is it solar ready? And those kinds of things. We've seen lots of buildings and housing complexes and stuff be approved in Ann Arbor where the houses are purposely designed so they don't face south. And just a slight change of the orientation of the buildings, you'd still get the same things. You might have to change the driveways a bit, but otherwise, you're making all of those houses solar access, and for a future time. So I would think, that would be one of the number one things is, well, if you can't do the economics now, does it work? At least don't put your roof in such so that you'll never, ever be able to put solar on, because when the economics do change, they're not going to change in your favor because you gave up your best option for on-site electrification, which is distributed solar on that building. Also raising its real estate value, et cetera. So I would think that's a question that could help you go forward if you could just get that answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Clevey. So, Commissioner Mills, did you have some other questions? And then we'll get to Commissioner Clark.
I do, but I want to let the others go. And just to say, like, in the interest of sharing between our committees, one of the tools, the incentive tools that we have is something called a planned project modification, which gives some flexibility to developers. It used to say solar orientation. You could check it off with solar orientation, and we actually changed it to say that's not enough. You need to go farther. And so, like, we're really trying, like, sure, we're not going far enough, clearly, but just so you've got some sense of kind of what kind of the mechanisms that we already have at our disposal, or what we're trying to do to better orient, not just orient, but like push them over that hump. So, clearly, other commissioners should clearly chime in, because I could just keep talking.
Commissioner Clark.
Hi, so I was interested a little bit more on the affordable housing. You mentioned that there's an area of opportunity for affordable housing, and like one thing Ann Arbor does well with our nonprofit and affordable housing has been trying to shift towards all electric, which is a pretty good accomplishment. And I'm just curious about, actually it's interesting because I think our affordable housing developers are held to higher standards than market rate here because we have to meet the enterprise green and living or an equivalent. And so I was just curious if you had any thoughts on if there are any other cities that have done like required or at least advised or had a score on the enterprise green that they were suggested to receive, or if you have a preferred criteria, the Living Buildings Challenge, or any of those, and which ones stand out?
Yeah, well, this area on building electrification and affordable housing is a growing space. And I'll mention that several housing agencies now have commitments to retrofit all their housing to all electric, especially because of the health impacts of and all the health benefits of all electric homes. But for new development or significant retrofits, the city that comes to mind as a good example is Philadelphia. They look to make it a requirement for all affordable housing, subsidized affordable housing, to meet a passive house standard, which is essentially all electric. There's some ways to get around it, but they tend to be all electric and are essentially zero emission. And they found consistently that there is essentially no cost difference for the developer between meeting the passive house standard versus the standard developments that were being built. And so that example is not shared in this resource list, but I think I can pull it out and send it to Missy to forward along if you're interested.
Sorry, can I clarify really quick? I was asking if there were any cities that had market rate developments required to do a certification similar, because our affordable housing already is held to pretty high standards as far as like going towards electrification and air quality, R score, all of that. And I was just curious if that was a model that's been done in other cities, or if that makes sense, or if there's a preferred set of criteria as opposed to others.
Got it. So you're asking about market rate housing, unregulated market rate housing. Is that right?
Yeah, just to see if we can hold them to the same standard as the affordable developments.
Yeah, it's pretty complicated, and there aren't very many examples of cities taking on existing buildings. There are maybe 3 or 4 that use a tool called the Building Performance Standard, which essentially it usually only is used for large buildings, which multifamily buildings might qualify under, but it requires buildings to meet a progressively tighter standard over time for emissions. And New York City, for example, has this, so does DC. St. Louis recently passed one as well. And that is something that Michigan could do. But it requires a lot of city investment because you essentially have to estimate the emissions of every building that you're monitoring. And that requires a pretty high degree of city management and oversight. And so we're seeing larger cities tackling this, but hopefully as more and more cities adopt this policy, they can they become more consistent, because you're right, there aren't a lot of policy levers for tackling existing buildings.
I think we need to be careful time-wise, but Missy, I see you have your hand up, and Sarah, I knew that you had some questions. Missy, you want to go first quickly?
Super quick, because I'll talk in the staff updates, but I just wanted to flag on that particular point that staff and OSI, working with a number of other units, do have a draft benchmarking and home energy disclosure ordinance, which would give us the foundational data that we need to be able to track how our buildings are performing, so we can elevate high performers and then be much more surgical in helping our underperformers be better performers in that landscape. So you'll be seeing that in the not too distant future.
The last question I had really Commissioner Randall, sorry. It links actually quite well to what Commissioner Clark was saying, which was in terms of specific standards. And this is more about, to RMI, about when you say green zoning. I've got a sense of what I think that means, but can you tell us like what your intention is by that, and like what others have done? Like what other places would you point us to that we might?
Yeah, so since we're short on time, I'll tell you what the resource is. On the list of documents, it is number 3. Massachusetts has done a lot on green zoning, and there are a lot of cities within Massachusetts that have implemented policies at the local level prior to being able, and they have a similar situation where they're not allowed to. Or they weren't allowed to develop their own building codes. So it's actually a very similar policy environment. So yeah, I'd point you to that resource, Sarah.
Commissioner Randall.
I'll be fast. One thing we've also heard from developers is that the capacity of our grid can't handle it. And that we've asked them to be able to put solar on top and things like that. And that's one way to address it. But if you're doing a high rise, there's only so much of the percentage of your building that can tackle. And I'm just wondering if there's anything you could guide us in any way in terms of how to either think about how to tackle that question, which seems immense, or if there are other things that we're just not aware of or thinking about when people raise that.
I think that's a great opportunity for a conversation with the utilities, because those situations are going to be so localized at the distribution level. And digging into the question too, because is it when they say that you think about winter peak versus summer peak, I think it gets quite complicated, and yeah, it's probably a pretty granular conversation with the utility. I'm not sure I can answer it with a good statement.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely work with the utility, or potentially intervene in regulatory proceedings the utilities are incentivized to do things like upgrade electric infrastructure because they can rate base a lot of that infrastructure improvement. And if they can't, perhaps that's a conversation you can have with the regulator. So I'd encourage you to look at resource number 2 in the existing resource list that talks about that exact issue.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Leonard.
I would just like to tap onto the complexity of that issue. Commissioner Mills had actually helped educate me with some conversations on this matter, and even things that I took for granted, for example, that a multifamily development on a per unit basis might be more efficient than a detached single family. In fact, we were hearing that from the utility that in fact they program those buildings sort of for a peak energy usage, which is higher on a per unit basis. That might not be borne out over operation, but again, the complexity of sizing that service for 100 units with the corresponding shared spaces and elevators and building systems for that building are quite different than 100 separate units. And so just to add a dimension to how complex that it is, and it probably does really rely on almost a case-by-case conversation and probably infrastructure sector by sector conversation with the utility companies.
Thanks for the comment. I think that reinforces the earlier comment about potentially requiring studies, because each one of these situations has a lot of different factors and is unique, how tall the building is, whether solar can go on the roof or not, what the FAR is of the building. All these things have implications with the envelope, how the envelope is designed. I think it might be something that we might want to talk about too, is some of the different standards that Commissioner Clark mentioned. And also, Anna Sophia, you talked about passive house. That's something we might want to talk about at some point. My understanding is that's generally pretty expensive because the envelope requirements are so tight. But these are all interdependent topics that impact then the energy use of the house. So it's pretty difficult to come up with one or two easy rule of thumbs and then apply it across the board to every single type of building, unfortunately. Go ahead. And then I'd like to maybe take one more comment or question and then move on to our second presentation.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that this goes back to the comment on government capacity. You're right. This often will require a judgment call to figure out is the developer acting in good faith? Have they made the best effort, or are they not aware of what exists in the market, and can I connect them with those resources? And your staff may already be capable and ready of having those really in-depth conversations across all these levels, but perhaps there needs to be development in some areas to support that level of individual scrutiny.
Yeah, good point. I mean, this is basically a multivariable optimization that we're talking about here, and gets really complex. That's why, larger buildings are using engineers to do this kind of stuff. I think Chuck was, understands that very well. So I guess we would like to thank you again, Brett and Anna Sophia, for joining us. It was really, I think, instructive, and maybe a good aspect of this was that we maybe left with more questions leaving it than what we entered, but that's a good thing because you've piqued our curiosity, and we're going to have, as Missy mentioned earlier, this workshop on heat pumps tomorrow. I think we have well over 150 people that are signed up, so maybe we're going to end up with even more questions after that. That's our job, is to hopefully start to provide some good answers to all these questions that are arising as we make this journey. So thanks again very much. And you're welcome to join us and continue to join us or with us with our second presentation, which is a presentation on a solarized model that's called Solar Faithful. And Murray, I don't know if you're there. Missy, do you see Murray by chance? I don't see him. Let's see.
Murray's with us. Murray, I think you wanted to leave your slides, right, Murray?
I see him now. Very good.
Okay, all right.
So Murray, we're ready, I think, to go ahead and do your presentation. Why don't you start with a brief introduction? I could do that, but you'll do it much better than I.
All right, but I'll introduce myself in a minute. But before we do, I want to do a little audience participation. How many here, raise your hand, belong to a house of worship? For instance, a church, synagogue, mosque. All right, I'm seeing probably about half. How many have a next door neighbor or good friend that belong to a synagogue, church, or house of worship? Everybody keep your hands up. So that's just about everybody. So I'm going to try to enlist your help at the end of my presentation. In the last presentation, one of the things people said was getting solar on as many roofs as we can. So that's what this is about. And working for a volunteer organization, a house of worship, I really have free labor because I just ask people to volunteer and they do it. I don't have to pay people to make decisions. So that's one big advantage I have. So let me share my screen. And start my presentation.
If you can go to full screen, that would be great. Yep, we see it. Wonderful.
All right, great. So here's where I introduce myself. You can see all my many roles, and I don't get paid for any of those. I'm retired. I make money as a consultant, but I'm president of the Genesis board. Genesis is a house of worship I'll be talking about today. I'm co-chair of the Genesis Green Team. That's how I got my start in this business of solar. I'm a member of the Ann Arbor 2030 District Leadership Council, which is trying to reduce energy usage of buildings here in Ann Arbor. I'm co-chair of Ann Arbor Solar Faithful, which is the organization which helped us do this project. And I was also recently invited to be on the Ann Arbor LMI Low to Middle Income Working Group for Solar. So I'm going to try to start this with a little 4-minute interview I did for the 2030 district, and let's hope it plays. If not, I have a fallback plan.
Hi, I'm Murray Rosenthal. More about me later. The important thing is that we're standing in front of the Genesis building. As you can see, this building houses 2 houses of worship, St. Clair's Episcopal Church and Temple Beth Emet. And this is the one of very few organizations in the world where 2 houses of worship have an equal partnership in worship. Today, we're going to talk about our solar installation, which went live in February of this year, 2020. This is our social hall, and there's 80 of these panels on the top of the social hall, the flat roof. There's also an office building on the other side where there's another 80 panels. That's 160 solar panels generating a ton of power. This is a very powerful model. Well, we're back inside the Genesis Sanctuary. And this is our neutral position where we can hold public events. But those panels fold out, and you can see the sacraments for the St. Clair's and also the ark for Genesis. So just to give you a background of where we're at. Now to give you my background, I'm a scientist. I just retired from Terumo a few months ago, where we made heart-lung machines. And before that, I was a clinical chemist, and I invented the first hemoglobin A1C test. So let's talk about the cost of solar panels. Those 160 panels on the 2 roofs here at Genesis will generate about 30% of our electrical power when our building is open. Right now it's closed because of COVID. But those panels cost money, in our case $120,000. but we used a very unique funding model called the investor model, where 20 congregates, about half from each congregation, half from TBE and half from St. Clair's, provided $5,000 to $15,000 as an investment, and they formed an LLC so they could take advantage of the 30% tax credit that was available in 2019. So that's a true win-win situation where the House of Worship only pays for the solar power generated. They're actually, Genesis is getting about a 16% discount right now from DTE rates. Now, we can't do this, we couldn't do this on our own. We had a lot of support from an organization called Michigan Interfaith Power and Light, and they're one of numerous interfaith power and light organizations across the country. Just about every state has one. And the goal of Michigan Interfaith Power and Light is to allow its members to practice great sustainability, to put solar installations, to put LEDs, like in this sanctuary we replaced all the lights with LEDs a few years ago. Now right now they have a climate voter initiative, which they're trying to get people, get out to vote and to vote for candidates. It's very important this time of year to vote for candidates who appreciate sustainability and will hopefully draft legislation to support solar panels and other sustainability. Just like to sum it up, hey, we did it. 160 panels, 160 solar panels above our heads here at Genesis.
All right. Was everybody able to hear that? Yeah, thumbs up. All right.
Yes.
All right, great. All right, I'm going to use an acronym in many of my slides. It's HOW. Very simple, means House of Worship. But in this case, it also means nonprofit, because nonprofits can benefit for this too. And here's a picture of Campus Chapel on the Michigan campus, and they have solar panels there too. Although they didn't use the investor model, they got some of the alumni to donate money, and they have a solar installation there too. Whoops. So I mentioned Ann Arbor Solar Faithful. It's basically an email group. We don't have any bylaws or a website or bank account. We're just a group of hungry, altruistic volunteers who want to get solar on any building, any nonprofit building we can in Ann Arbor or Washtenaw County. And actually, John recently joined the board. Thanks, John, for helping out. So this is about the Solar Faithful Investor Model, as I showed in the interview there. And there's going to be 3 parts to my presentation. What we did, and the next slide has a quote from a very, very patriotic American, Jerry Garcia. Somebody had to do something, and it's just incredibly pathetic that it had to be us. So the second part of the presentation is why we did it, and the third is how we did it. So here's what we did. And these are the numbers. You can read them, but your images are blocking my view. So there's 160 solar panels. It's a 64 kilowatt system, 400 watts per panel, and 31% of the consumed power. And Larry Kerber, who was our installer, he told us in our quote that we would generate 31% of our power. And it turned out for the first year, it was 30.6. That's pretty close. And that's versus a normal year. We were close, so it's actually over 50% because we were close. But compared to previous years when we were open, it was 30.6. Went live in February last year. This is a little closer pictures. You can see on the left, the panels on the slanted office roof are actually attached to the roof. The ones on the flat roof of the social hall are weighted down by concrete blocks, so they can be removed if we needed to do service on the roof. And you can see we have an app on my phone, and I look at it pretty much daily to see how much power we're generating from our inverter. So why do we need an LLC for this investor model? Well, there's two reasons. There's the 30% tax credit that we take advantage of, our investors, and we also have depreciation. So this is the way the investor model works. Eastover Power, which is the company that the congregants formed, they bought the panels and paid for the installation, and they own the panels. And Genesis agrees to have the panels on the roof and use the power and pay Eastover for the power generated. The investors in Eastover get a 30% tax credit as we speak. They're probably getting their refund this week, I hope. And Genesis pays a little bit less for the electricity, 11.5 cents, fixed rate for the next 20 years. And the current DTE rate, when I made this PowerPoint pack, was 12.5, is actually almost 13.5 now. So it's quite a savings. DTE typically raises rates once a year. So we formed this company called Eastover from the congregants of St. Clair's Episcopal Church in Temple Beth Emeth. And one of the investors thought of this name, Eastover. And because Eastover, Genesis is located on the corner of Packard Street and Eastover Place, so why not name it Eastover? But that's not the real reason. The real reason is because it's a contraction of our two spring holidays, Easter and Passover. So here's why we did it. It's our shared climate volatility problem. And people like to say global warming, but it's not only warming, it's the climate is more volatile. Even we're getting cold snaps just because the cold air from Canada is being dragged down by our hotter climate. We wanted to reduce the carbon footprint of our building. That's one of the reasons why. We wanted long-term energy cost savings, and we are saving money already. The first year we saved about $700. Increased property value, another reason. And Genesis sponsors a food bank, and it's in a really old, 150-year-old building in the front of our property called the Wisdom House. And we help 100 to 200 people with their food every week. And why do we do that? There's no payback for that. We do it anyways, because it's the right thing to do. And that's the main reason that we put solar on there, is because it's the right thing to do. And here's how we did it. And this is a big process, but we made it simple for you. We have a how-to document. So I'm only going to cover the first step. The other 17 are covered in the document, and I'll give a little detail on some of them, but I'm just going to look at the detail of the very first step because I think it's the most interesting step. So our focus for today is the how investor model. There's a federal solar tax credit. It's an energy tax credit, it's called an investment tax credit. And it's been extended through 2022, thanks to Congress when they passed that bill for our, I think it was a $600 or $400 per person payment back in early part of this year. They also extended the 26% tax credit 2 more years. So if they hadn't done that, it would have gone down to 22% next year in 2023, or I'm sorry, 2022. So that gives us a little bit of rope before we hang ourselves. So you got to get the initial buy-in. Talk to the people in charge. Talk to your clergy, your lay leaders, your board members about the idea in general terms. And since you all raised your hands, you can do that or get your friend to do that. And make them an offer they can't refuse. I mean, this is like a no-brainer. They're going to get solar installed at no cost, no donations, no payments except for the power that's generated. using this investor model. You're going to save money in year one and not pay a cent. This is a no-brainer. So tell them about similar success stories at other buildings, and we're going to get to that later. And just tell them you're going to explore the idea for now. We're not forcing you to do anything. Just think about it. So then ask the question, may we proceed with a solar power investment group? And they're going to say, interesting, you may proceed. So we took it to the 2 congregational boards and the Genesis board. And one of the congregational board wanted the investment opportunity open to all members of both congregations, but specifically said they only want the congregants to be members of the investment group. So we couldn't go to Bill Gates or somebody else with deep pockets, but that doesn't mean that another church can't. You can find somebody who pays, anybody who pays taxes and has some extra money lying around can be an investor and make it an altruistic investment and even make some money over the years. So we covered step 1 in detail, as I said, and there's a total of 18 steps, and they're in our how-to document, which is actually on the Michigan Interfaith Power and Light website, and it's going to be referenced on the next page here. There it is. And that's where you should look for the how-to document. But in any case, Solar Faithful is supported by Michigan Interfaith Power and Light, so that's why they put that on their website, and that's another example of win-win, where just an informal email group of volunteers is being supported by a large organization. And Interfaith Power and Light is a national organization. Just about every state has that in office. So that's where it is. And this is part of step 14. This is actually a part of a power purchase agreement. We entered into actually 3 agreements to do this. One was a power purchase agreement, which shows how much we pay for electricity over the years, and buyback, which is in the right-hand column. So the panels are depreciated, and after year 5, we have a buyback where if Genesis and the 2 congregations wants to buy the installation and no longer pay us for pay Eastover for the power, they can do it. And there's buyback going all the way out to year 20, at which point the panels will be fully depreciated and Eastover Power will donate the panels if they haven't been bought out already. And so at Genesis, we kind of run in quicksand because we have to get everybody in the same boat. I mean, if we're in a board meeting and the vote is 7-1, we got to go back to the drawing board. We need consensus. I mean, for every different issue. I mean, that's the way we operate. And so to do this, we had to only get 5 different entities to approve it: the Genesis board, the Temple Beth Emeth board, the St. Clair's Vestry, the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan, which sicked their lawyers on us, and St. Clair's had a congregational vote. So pretty much, if you have a church and do this, you probably only have to pass 1 of these. I had 5. It took about 6 months, but hey, we did it. So there were 3 parts to our presentation here. And here's some resources. We have that how-to document on the Michigan Interfaith Power and Light website. We have Solar Faithful here to support anybody who wants to do this. We have our faith upline, our boards and our clergy who supported us in doing this. Sustainability, there are religious tenets that support sustainability of the earth in which we live. Our group loves to present, just like I'm doing right now. Just ask us. We have communication. I'm constantly answering questions from churches. Your installers are a very big resource. Use them. They are great, including Larry. And the government, you guys are supporting what we do. we have publicity. I've been asked by many times about our installation by our congregants, and even one of the people in the investment group put solar panels on his optometrist office building in Ypsilanti. So this is generating interest. There's 2 articles in the Washington Jewish News. One was in September, one in April last month. And so far, we've saved about 138,000 pounds of CO2 emissions, equivalent to planting over 1,000 trees. So what's the path forward? So we need your help. We want to get this set up like they have in Detroit, where they have interested houses of worship. They meet on a monthly basis, and they learn about energy savings they can do for their building. And we want to set this up here in Ann Arbor with our vast amount of volunteer activity. We can do it. And we're thinking of starting to get this going, hopefully by the fall. And we're working through the 2030 district and also Michigan Interfaith Power and Light to support this. So if you have a church, find out who the green team is. If you don't have a green team, tell your pastor you need one and ask somebody to volunteer, and let's get them enrolled in this. All right, so Genesis was only an example. There are 7 other buildings in Southeast Michigan who have done this using the investor model. A total of 534 panels, 188 kilowatts, and just a little bit under $500,000 in investment. And I did leave a PDF of this because I know it's really busy. And if you want to look at the details, it's in the same folder as this presentation. And here's a picture of Ozone House, with which John Mirsky and Jen Culbertson formed that LLC, and that was new construction, and the solar panels were, I think, on in a day one. It's a beautiful, beautiful campus there for Ozone House. So I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Murray. I'd like to comment real quickly or emphasize before I open the floor up for questions that this can be used for any nonprofit. So it can be used on Green Hills schools. It could be used for a parochial school. It could be used for a government or a township building. It can be used outside of the Ann Arbor area. This is not obviously exclusive to the city of Ann Arbor. This can be used anywhere nationwide. I'm working with my brother-in-law in New Jersey to put it on their house of worship just outside of New York City. So when you think of this model, it can be used by any nonprofit that is owning a building and using power for that building. So think of this in the broadest terms. And I'd also like to just point out that when Murray talks about all these steps, there are templates for all the contracts. There are templates for calculating the costs, and you can change any of the variables to see what the impact is for all the parties. So this is really something that has been standardized, and we have now a bunch of best practices that can be applied and tweaked to any organization's needs to be able to apply this model. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Commissioner Clevey.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Murray. Just a quick comment. Over about 25 years ago, Reverend Charles Morris and I hooked up with Jerry Lawson. We got a grant from Jerry, and we founded the Michigan Interfaith Power and Light. And basically in my living room at the time in Farmington Hills. So I just want to say how pleased I am to see how this project has happened, and that you have far exceeded our expectations for this. And I thank you so much for keeping this thing going and doing so well. So do more. It's great. We got 12,000 congregations in Michigan, so let's hit them all. So congratulations. Good. Well done.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there's over 100 in Ann Arbor by itself.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Lee.
I just wanted to say thank you. There's no silver bullet to environmental sustainability. And so I just wanted to say thank you for obviously doing this and putting together the, obviously the entire pamphlet related to this. So literally from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Hey,
You're welcome.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And one way you can, you're welcome me is hook me up with your house of worship.
And again, this can cross state lines. So if any of you know someone in another state, or for that matter, another part of Michigan, have them reach out to Murray or to me or others. Commissioner Schreiberg.
Yeah, I wanted to echo thanks. And actually, I'm a member of Temple Beth Emeth and on the commission. I didn't even realize this existed. So this is amazing. I wanted to just ask how you're doing, or if the outreach to membership of these houses of worship is part of that process. I won't take long on this, but I work at the National Wildlife Federation. We have a program called Sacred Grounds that works with houses of worship to install native plant gardens. But the key component is actually, inspiring and incentivizing people to do it at home. So I'm just wondering if there are parallel efforts in terms of inspiring home and other installations on solar.
Great question. And we do have several houses of worship who over the years with Solar Faithful have expressed interest, and some of them have done it, as I've shown. And the problem is when I reach out to a house of worship, a pastor, or perhaps a congregant, I email, I call, but I get voicemail, I get no response. I think I've sent out over 100 emails and called maybe 5 or 6 cold calls, and I just get stonewalled except for once. So, hey, if I need your help to point me to the right person to make the introduction. That's all I need. Just do the groundwork and make that introduction. And once I get my foot in the door, they'll see this is really a no-brainer.
Anyone else?
I also wanted to add something that John had an idea about, and I did have some interest from a condo association. A condo association could put solar to at least provide electricity to the common areas, maybe the outside lighting. So that's another type of nonprofit, quote, nonprofit that can benefit from this.
And if you have a question about whether an organization would qualify, we would certainly be willing to pursue clarification of that matter for you. So, well, thank you very much, Murray, and hopefully you'll get a lot more inquiries.
Right. So if you need my email, just ask Josh McDonald or Missy. They can hook you up with my email. All right.
Very good.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So that ends our formal presentations. And I'd just like to offer to the Planning Commission that the next point on our agenda is a report from the Energy Office and the Office of Sustainability. And one of the things that Missy is going to cover is some of the broad details of the settlement agreement between the city and DTE. And so depending on what other topics you have to consider, you're welcome to stay for that. I have a hard stop at 8 p.m. your time, 5 p.m. my time. So I'm going to turn over the running of the meeting, if I may, to my vice chair, Carlene Calvin Garcia, and I'll stay on for just a few more minutes, but then I'll leave. But Missy, do you want to take things then from here?
Yeah, we have a lot of updates relevant to the conversation today. So I'm so excited to have some of our Planning Commission colleagues with us. Before I kind of I'm going to give a slew. It's going to be like fire hose style, friends, just letting you know what's about to come your way. But before I do that, we have a special guest with us coming on camera right now. Valerie Brader is the city's external legal counsel, and I invited Val to join us to give the overview of the settlement. Val, would you like to take it away?
Sure. So I think as many folks saw, the Ann Arbor City Council approved unanimously a settlement of the DTE voluntary green power case. And it had a lot of what we had really wanted to see in it. So I wanted to make sure folks who were very interested were aware, because it's good things right now, but also the promise of some really exciting things in the future that would not be available, but for being able to work with DTE under our current law. So the fact that we were able to get it through a settlement is actually better than what we would have been able to get from pure litigation. So one of those things is right now, the way the voluntary green power programs or the My Green Power programs work is that residents have sort of access to one program which is backed by certain projects, and businesses have access to others, newer projects, some of which are a lot cheaper than the ones that were built originally to serve the residents. And that really created a situation where larger users could get better prices than smaller users. And under the settlement, there will be one pool of projects. So it will no longer be that, businesses get access to these kind of newer, cheaper ones and residents don't. It will actually be one pool of projects that we'll be able to use. So that really should benefit residents who would like to participate. Another big thing that we got was really talking about the Landfill Solar project and Ann Arbor's desire to have some community solar type options for residents. And we've been able to kind of put those together in that DT has agreed to run a pilot program where if, Ann Arbor will essentially build the landfill solar and sponsor it, we can open up part of the project to anybody in DTE. So any customer in DTE would have the option to say, I want to sign up for that in the same way I sign up for My Green Power today. They'd get a share of our power and get the same credits and the same costs as we would. So it is truly a kind of equal footing for folks who choose to sign up to participate in sort of whatever size of the project that we would be. And this also makes it a lot easier to have the discussions with Pittsfield Township about their desire to participate, because now it's as easy as signing up for a new program, compared to trying to do all kinds of complicated workarounds. And again, we're able to offer it to residents and businesses. So people, assuming that the project is buildable and is, comes forward with a reasonable cost so that, Ann Arbor wants to go forward, we'll be able to offer that to anyone who wants to have the same solar benefits that we do in terms of ownership and the kind of credits that you would get in the program. So while DT will own that program or will own the project, itself being on the landfill, that's probably a good thing for the city because of the liabilities that can come from building on a landfill. There will be that opportunity to participate on an equal footing and get all the benefits of the project, and the costs and all that shared, just as if you were, the anchor tenant, which Ann Arbor would be. So that's really exciting because it gives us a lot of control for being able to offer something that we know residents wanted, but also people across DT's territory can participate. So that was a big win. And then another win really looks at what's in the future for our ability to really address some of the equity issues and environmental justice issues while looking at meeting our sustainability goals more efficiently and more quickly. And right now, Michigan is one of only 4 states where you can get the same kind of green attribute for doing extra energy efficiency as you can for building a solar field. So, if your solar panel would have generated 1 kilowatt, but your energy efficiency project generates or prevents 1 kilowatt from going, under Michigan law, if you work with the utility, you can get the same credit for that. Nobody has ever tried
tried that, and we really wanted DTE to try that with us. And they have committed to working with us over the next 2 years to design that kind of program. We call it a voluntary power reduction agreement instead of power purchase agreement. That would let someone like in Ann Arbor that's saying, look, I want to be greener immediately. It really invest in, say, schools in disadvantaged areas or host communities that need new boilers, or rec centers, or things for kids, or nonprofits, museums, or other kinds of facilities, and make those more energy efficient. It's great because we know that that demand means carbon is coming off the grid. So not just that we're adding clean generation, but we're actually removing a demand that would likely be filled with carbon generation. It would also let us, again, address some of the historic inequities if we wanted to do that. And it tends to be quite cost efficient. And especially as it may take a while to get things built, it can also be a good filler for while you're waiting for that solar to come online, you're not waiting to reduce carbon. So we're really excited because DT is committed to working with us to try to put forward that kind of program in the next filing in 2 years. Which would mean it would be available, again, not just to Ann Arbor, but to other customers that wanted to do the same. And both the community solar and the voluntary power reduction agreement and other kind of carbon reduction sort of programs are things that you can't get by suing. The Public Service Commission of the government can't force DT to offer exciting products to us, but as part of the settlement process, DT did agree to do so in the anchor tenant for community solar space, and then for this voluntary power reduction agreement to work with us over the next 2 years to develop that product. So there were many other good things in the settlement too, but in the interest of time, I won't necessarily go into those unless folks have questions, but really puts Ann Arbor in a great position to advance some of its sustainability goals in ways that would not have been possible but for that settlement.
Thank you so much, Al. So that's one exciting thing that's moving locally. Also wanted to share that we have respondents in for our RFP for rooftop solar. So we're moving that forward. That's for city facilities, somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 megawatts of rooftop solar we hope to have be installed in the not distant future. We're working on a parallel RFP for affordable housing sites, which is super exciting. And then here comes the deluge. We had worked, I shared this with the Energy Commission, I believe, but we had worked with Congresswoman Dingell to submit a bunch of potential infrastructure asks, including a net zero energy fire station. We are building a new fire station 4, and we've been working with the chief to design that too, a net zero energy all electric build. So we submitted for some funding to support that. We also worked with our colleagues at the Ann Arbor Housing Commission to submit resources to have all of our housing sites be retrofit to be safer, more comfortable, all electric, and to have generation on site, so rooftop or geothermal, depending on the assets and the attributes of that particular set of infrastructure we're looking at. So it's pretty exciting. Fingers crossed that manifests itself. Excuse me. I also want to pick up, this is where it gets a little crazy in my notes because I was following what RMI was talking about. Want to share that tomorrow we do have a heat pump workshop. I just checked registration. We're over 200 now. We're at 209 registrants households for that event, which is really exciting. This is a workshop that will have contractors there as well as RMI and others to talk about heat pump technology and what really is viable here. And contractors will be present to answer questions from individuals, but this is part of educating folks. Heat pumps actually do work in our climate, and what does that mean and what's right for you? But many of you identified this is a really sticky problem because it's not as simple as I have to help Councilmember Rodina understand that a heat pump makes sense. He's going to go to the market and then his contractor is likely going to talk about a heat pump. So we're also working with Michigan Saves and others on contractor training and incentive programs. So we get to a heat pump first program where when a contractor comes into your home, the assumption is that they are helping you make a switch to an electric, and that it's actually a hurdle to get to natural gas, as opposed to right now, it is a hurdle, potentially even a boulder. You have to put up a mountain to get someone to sell you a heat pump. So we need to change that aspect. We also are working with manufacturers, primarily Mitsubishi, Trane, Carrier, and Rheem, to look at incentive programs and their training so that they're bringing more product, they're training their contractors on their products, they're giving more incentives. So we're trying to intervene at multiple points in the system. Last thing to share on that part, well, actually 2 more things to share. We did submit to the governor and ask for new funding from the stimulus that would focus on direct rebates to individuals to do the right thing. We're also asking our state legislators tomorrow for the same thing. Right now, you can get incentives. You can't get incentives for fuel switching, right? To go from a natural gas system to a very, very efficient electric system. You're not going to get support for that. So that's one thing we want to rectify. And the second is many of the programs we talk about have tax incentives. But that doesn't work, as we've heard, if you're not a tax-paying entity and you don't have an LLC set up. You're low income and you don't pay taxes. So why not have a direct rebate to help lower access and get money in people's pockets really fast so more and more people can access this? We're working on multiple points of intervention at the federal and state level with a bunch of others on that initiative. We also are launching a sticker replacement campaign. I am so sorry, everyone. I really do talk this fast. We have a lot. I want to save you some time. We have a sticker campaign. Our stickers are en route, which you would put on your furnace or your air conditioner, and it's cheeky, and I am happy to share it with all of you. And it's basically saying, next time I'll be electric. And it's a reminder, right? Because when your furnace goes, you're not going to make that switch at that moment, or your heat pump goes. So how do you make the commitment in advance? And so we'll be launching that for A20 week, which is so exciting. A20 week is June 1st through June 6th. We hope you will all join us. We have a series of decentralized and distributed events around town. I think last count we're at 20 different events, and they center on learning something, doing something, and having some fun around carbon neutrality and equity work. This smattering of events, we just solidified we're working with Ann Arbor Public Schools, so we'll be sending a backpack flyer out. And then all pre-K through 5th grade, we are doing an emergency preparedness initiative with them to help the families create an emergency plan. We're going to be distributing little bedside flashlights to all of the youth in pre-K through 5. They're fun, but they're also really functional. If you've got a natural disaster, right, you've got light, you've got access. If you have a financial disaster and you can't afford electricity for some reason, you can still do your homework, you can still access, you can feel safe, you can sneak under the covers and read a book at night when your parents don't want you to. Lots of cute things can happen with a flashlight. So we'll be distributing those through the school, and then we'll be doing a competition, a drawing for everyone who submits an emergency preparedness plan. They'll be entered for a family of 4 emergency preparedness kit that they can get, which comes fully stocked for up to 3 days of full supplies, materials that they would need. We're also working with Ann Arbor Public Schools to do emergency kit distribution at their food distribution sites where we've got our families in the greatest need. So we really want to focus on making sure those families have the resources they need to not just survive, but thrive. Gosh, let's see. So much going on. Other fun things in A20 week. We are going to do meditation, which is really key for some of us to like slow our paces down. We also have a fun event with the Ann Arbor Distilling Company. They are launching a new drink called Tree Hugger. You might actually see it soon hitting their shelves. The proceeds of this drink go to helping do tree planting in low income areas of our community. So if you are so inclined to support a local business, hop on by. We're formally doing a launch on Saturday of that event. And then there's just so much. We have a mural that's going to be launched for A20 at Gallup. We're recognizing sustainability champions in the community. There's a call for nominations. If you know someone that we should highlight, please take a look. And again, I'll send the link out to everyone. Excuse me, we're launching A20 kits with Ann Arbor District Library so people can do their own home assessments and learn about energy. There's so much. It's delightful. Last few things to kind of round us out. We do work, this is more for Planning Commission colleagues. We meet every month with executives at DTE. And our last month's meeting was on grid capacity and hosting capacity. So we are looking at where we're tight on the grid, where we've got room on the grid. We're asking for more data. And in fact, we've asked them to project a doubling of electrical demand for Ann Arbor, and they are factoring that into their designs and upgrade efforts, because our models that Fong on the line has helped us develop show that we will double electrical demand with EV charging infrastructure and with the electrification work that's coming. So we do meet with them regularly. Our building department is also helping us start crack electrification. So when you fill out a permit, we might just know you're getting a furnace, but we're now going to understand if you want electric or you want gas. So we can start seeing how our interventions are or are not influencing the market. There is so much more, but I'm going to stop there. That's kind of a smattering of some of the stuff going on. It's really good to see your faces, and thank you for sitting with me for that. Back over to you, Co-Chair Garcia.
I was so excited, taking all kinds of notes of your update. I got questions. but I'll hold those for another time. Like everything that you said was super exciting, and I need to submit my sustainability champion application. So everyone, please think about people in your world and even yourselves, and submit your nomination. Okay, so moving on to working group updates. We have a report from the Environmental Commission, which we can skip until next month. So we have the, which of the groups do we have that are in action right now? We have the concierge group that's working, correct? Who would like to give an update on that? Chuck, you're in that group, right?
Yeah, we have our 5th meeting tomorrow night. We're making progress. We've created a questionnaire that we're going out to various host cities with, and had reporting responsibilities for all the members of the task force. And so making movement, I think we should have something pulled together here. I don't want to speak for the group, but month or two out, we'll have something, some outline or some feedback to this group.
All right, thanks. All right. And the Transportation Electrification Committee did not have a meeting this week, or this month, I'm sorry. So there's no update at this point in time. Does anyone else have another update? Councilmember Briggs, you have a question?
I just thought, since we were doing a joint session of Planning Commission and Energy Commission, I had sent a note to Mr. Leonard today asking about kind of an update on the lighting ordinance, and he had sent me back an update on that. And I just thought others might be interested to know on kind of where we're at in terms of the status of that ordinance that both of our commissions work together on.
That'd be terrific.
I thought, Mr. Leonard, you might want to just, it's a brief, I thought you might want to.
Yeah. No problem. So the that work group had put forth a revised outdoor lighting ordinance. It was passed by the Planning Commission some time ago. It has been somewhat languishing on my desk. The reason for that is some of the conversation that came out of the Planning Commission was, I would say, a desire to continue to evaluate whether or not zoning was the proper place for all of the corresponding regulations that were a part of that, and specifically as it relates to maybe realizing the benefits of it more quickly than zoning would typically provide for. Zoning is prospective and long. And in short, I haven't been able to find a lot of good corollary examples that would suggest that there are a lot of opportunities within our legislative framework. So the short of it is that it'll probably be proceeding in its current format as adopted by Planning Commission without any recommended changes. And I anticipate that coming to City Council either in June or July for consideration.
Are there any questions from either commission on this? Okay, moving on. This is our opportunity for public input at the end of the meeting. And if for persons who are interested, you have up to 3 minutes to speak. If you're watching on CTN, please call 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter the meeting ID number 91357834502. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press the *9 on your phone. When you hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Awesome. We have caller 134.
Thank you, Dr. Stoltz and Co-Chair Colvin Garcia. This is Ken Garber, 28 Haverhill Court. A few random comments. On the problem of getting developers to go all electric in new construction, I really like Commissioner Hookham's suggestion that we focus on life cycle costs, which is also something emphasized in RMI's report on economics of electrifying buildings that Mr. Bridge had mentioned. In all 7 cities RMI looked at, including Columbus and Minneapolis, the life cycle cost of all electric buildings was lower than for gas. It's true there can be grid capacity issues, as Commissioner Gibb Randall mentioned, but so far anyway, these haven't kept Valhalla, Glen, Viridian, 2111 Packard, and Lockwood Senior Living from committing to going all electric. Yeah, every case is different, but in general, it seems to make economic sense to go all electric in new construction. I know Planning Commission sometimes hears developer say that going all electric will lead to higher utility bills for residents. That wasn't true in 5 of the 7 cities that RMI looked at, but I think it's true here. When I compared gas to electric for my rental condominium, I calculated that I'm paying only 64 cents per therm or 100 cubic feet of gas or 100,000 BTUs. They're all equivalent, exclusive of fixed charges. That compares to $1.52 per therm for a theoretical air source heat pump, assuming an average heat pump coefficient of performance of 3. So that means my heating bills would roughly double if my landlord replaced my furnace with a split system heat pump. I might have made a gross error somewhere, but I think Wayne Appleyard came up with similar numbers when he looked at his home. There's been some email exchange on this. So my question is, why are gas heating bills so much lower than electric heat pump bills would be in Ann Arbor? Is it because our electric rates are so high, our gas rates are so low, or a combination? A combination probably, but I suspect it's mostly electric rates. DTE is charging me about 17.5 cents per kilowatt hour, assuming 500 kilowatt hours usage per month, accounting for fixed charges as well as the usage base rate. That's about 32% higher than the national average residential electric rate and significantly higher than what residents of Lansing, Holland, Traverse City, Wyandotte, and Chelsea pay. Yeah, rooftop solar can help, but we've seen in recent multifamily approvals that rooftop solar only provides a small fraction of the building electric demand. If we had a more reasonable residential electric rate, the economics of building electrification would be much more favorable. Planning Commission may not be aware, but there's been an active discussion at Energy Commission in recent months about establishing or moving towards a municipal electric utility to take over from DTE. Apart from better rates, a city-owned electric utility should have the ability to acquire renewable electricity from the grid to power our newly electrified buildings. The VGP settlement with DTE that Ms. Brader discussed is great, but it does nothing to get us to that goal. We do know the challenges of doing a muni, but we should consider moving forward with at least a feasibility study. And I hope this discussion can continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. Anybody else missing?
No, co-chair. We don't have anyone else in the queue.
Okay, so we are at 8:20 p.m. And thank you so much, members of the Planning Commission, for joining us on tonight's meeting. And I think it was very beneficial and productive tonight. And perhaps we might want to consider doing something like this again, maybe on one of your meetings, or however, you know, like just I think it's very good for us to be able to like get familiar with each other and utilize each other as resources in our respective responsibility here. So I believe we should just go ahead and call the close of the meeting. And is there anybody else who'd like to make a comment or who has a question at this point? Okay.
I think we just need a motion to adjourn.
We need a motion to adjourn. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Lee. I need a second. Okay, Councilmember Radina. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks so much, everyone.